Every week on Cyberwork, listeners ask us the same question. What cybersecurity skills should I learn? Well, try this. Go to infosecinstitute.com/free to get your free cybersecurity talent development ebook. It's got in-depth training plans for the 12 most common roles, including SOC analyst, penetration tester, cloud security engineer, information risk analyst, privacy manager, secure coder, and more. We took notes from employees and a team of subject matter experts to build training plans that align with the most in-demand skills. You can use the plans as is or customize them to create a unique training plan that aligns with your own unique career goals. One more time, just go to infosecinstitute.com/free or click the link in the description to get your free training plans, plus many more free resources for Cyberwork listeners. Do it. infosecinstitute.com/free. Now, on with the show. Today on Cyberwork, Mark Kapczynski of OneRep reminds us of that awful truth most people either don't know about or don't like to think about. Your personal information, your address, your phone number, your age, all of these things are on the public internet for anyone to find, including scammers. Mark talks about OneRep's mission to scrub personal information from these sites, suggests changes that could stop all of this, and lets you know about ways that you could base a career in this fight for data privacy and data autonomy. All that and a detour into grade school home computer shenanigans today on Cyberwork. Welcome to this week's episode of the Cyberwork with Infosec podcast. Each week we talk with a different industry thought leader about cybersecurity trends, the way those trends affect the work of Infosec professionals, while offering tips for breaking in or moving up the ladder in the cybersecurity industry. Mark Kapczynski, right?
You said it perfectly.
Beautiful. Mark Kapczynski is the SVP, Senior Vice President of Strategic Partnerships at OneRep. OneRep.com helps consumers protect themselves online by scrubbing their personal information from Google and privacy-breaching websites. Mark comes from a strong background in the identity theft protection and consumer credit world, having spent numerous years at Experian, including working on freecreditreport.com and Protect My ID. Mark spent 15 years working in the fintech/financial services industry, including at InvestNet, Yodlee, supporting many different consumer fintech offerings. Mark is the former CMO of Guten, a smart supply chain solution, as well as former CMO of Wrench, the market leader for on-demand car care. He is the executive director of the UCLA Venture Capital Fund, supporting innovation by young entrepreneurs. So Mark's work with OneRep folds into several pressing concerns for us at Infosec. Breaches and hacks, of course, are now very much a way of life. There's just no way around that. And most folks who live some or all of their lives online get an email once in a while from a trusted company with whom they have an account saying that their data was breached, and you should probably change your password as quickly as possible. Now, you combine that with the ease with which cyber criminals can access some of your most personal data in public, and suddenly something that should be fixable in 30 seconds, like changing your password, has the potential to damage multiple aspects of your life. So our discussion will be around getting your personal info about yourself offline as necessary, how this came to be so easily accessible in the first place, and what the fight will be in the future to keep our data out of the public eye. Mark, thanks for joining me today. Welcome to Cyberwork.
Thanks for having me. Looking forward to the discussion.
Awesome. So, to get us started, I'd like to know you have a pretty long history in history and in security, rather, and also sort of personal ID. So, how far back does your interest in computer and tech go? What was the initial interest?
Wow. Well, when I saw the write-up and your questions, I was thinking about that, and it actually goes back to, I think I was in middle school, and I grew up in a time when people didn't just instantly have a computer at age 4. Right. I grew up at a time when computers were relatively new at home. And so my dad bought us a computer, and I had wanted an IBM. Like at the time, it was like, I wanted an IBM, but he got us a clone. I got a clone. Okay. I wasn't happy, but we got a really good printer. And so I actually started selling cheat sheets to my friends first to help them with school, because this printer was so high quality. I could get the font really small, and I laminated little cards so that they could have like little cheat sheets on their hand going through school. Amazing. And I actually outsourced the typing to my mom because she could type 100 words a minute. And so my love for computers actually started in probably something I shouldn't have just admitted.
Yeah, I think the statute of limitations is with
It's
your
over by now.
whatever your grade school was. I think you're good to go now. So I guess from a technical standpoint, what was the difference between the clone and the IBM in terms of like what one could do and couldn't do?
Well, part of it was, I was young, so everyone wanted the name brand.
It was kind of like designer jeans or whatever. It's like, Mom, you got me Oshkosh, and I wanted
and like
regular.
the IBM screen was green, and it looked cool, and my screen was amber, and like people would come over, like, oh, what's wrong with your computer? It's amber,
Oh yeah, we're definitely of the same generation. I remember the green the green touch screens at the library. You beep, piled up like you were getting dinner. Your career path is an interesting one, as it covers stints in credit security with Experian and freecreditreport.com, mentorship and startup advice, and even streaming content from the early days of streaming. We're talking 95 to 02 people. So what are some of the through lines of all this different types of work? What's the satisfaction you get out of all of these various types of jobs?
Yeah, it's interesting because the way I went to UCLA, and the way I paid my way through college was I wrote software. It was the best paying job you could get at the time. And in particular, I learned how to build databases. And so right from the beginning, I would say I learned to appreciate data collection, data storage. And I saw how, because I was in the film industry, everything was still analog, right? Or very physical, right? You had a piece of film, you had videotape, and the idea of, wow, like I'm working in this software industry with data, and the film industry and TV industry is all analog. Like, why hasn't it progressed? And I think that was really the through line of like, how do we bring these legacy industries, legacy ways of doing things, analog ways of doing things into using truly data? And how do you then help those industries master the use of it? And so I used to work for Microsoft in 95 to 2002. And that was so much fun because we were at the forefront of helping people learn how to digitize the moving image, creating data, managing it all, securing it all with things like digital rights management, so that then we could distribute it all the way out to the consumer. And it was a really exciting time.
That's really interesting too, because I've had guests. You're also in the financial tech industry as well, and we've had a fair number of people in healthcare, and all of them have had a similar, and around the same time, I suppose, but a similar before after point of this was an industry that worked in paper and typewriters and analog, and then it was the sort of like that massive amount of effort, and also just plain sort of persuasion to get them to understand why we got to get all these medical records digitized and shareable. And it sounds like it's the same with the film industry and the financial industry and so forth.
Yeah. Well, after Microsoft, I started a software company. I got venture funded, and our whole mission was to build a system that could record the moving image right from the camera on a set at the highest quality levels, right to commoditized spinning hard drives, right? Turn it right into data from the beginning. And part of the reason or motivation to start that was, I think Star Wars Episode 2 had just been released at about that time. And George Lucas was talking about how it was all digital. And I was like, no, it's not. You shot on digital videotape. You didn't shoot on data. Like, we need to have data, not digital video. So it was kind of like this like personal challenge of like, we're going to create data. We're not going to create digital videotape. And so that just,
I imagine there's not a lot of
managing data was great.
I imagine there's not a lot of digital videotape left in Hollywood at this point, right?
Not at this point. A lot of the cameras, in particular, there's a camera called the Red camera that just records right to data, and it was very cost efficient to purchase and use. And then all the big providers like Panavision and Arri all moved to data, and so now finding film is kind of an art form,
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, I'm. That's where my love lies. We have a repertory theater here in Chicago, and I saw a 70 millimeter screening of Licorice Pizza, and it was extraordinary. But yeah, I also also love a good cold David Lynch digital affair as well. So as stated at the top of the show, OneRep is a service that helps its clients remove their personal information from over 150 common websites. So to start things rolling, what types of personal data do you typically see collecting on the public internet? Are we talking addresses, phone numbers, even social security numbers? And how did we get to this point? Is this a failure of data privacy regulation, or a lot of back alley shenanigans, or just a case of nobody minding the store?
Yeah, probably a little bit of all of that. Let me take the first part first.
Sure.
So what data is out there? It's primarily all your personal information minus things like your social security number. So different than a data breach, like you were talking about it at the opening. Data breaches typically have like your bank accounts, your driver's license, your passport, your social security number. But they don't have much PII associated with it, right? It's like a list of names and numbers. And that's usually it. What you have on these like what are known as people search websites, so sites like White Pages and Spokeo and My Life and Ben Verified, all these kind of sites, they have sort of what I think of as like the rest of your story. So if your data is been exposed in a data breach, the fraudsters can simply go to these people search sites and get the rest of the information that they would need in order to start creating accounts and so on. So they get your name, they get your full name, they get your prior names, like if you were married or divorced or so on. They get all your addresses, so they know where you live. They get your date of birth, they get your age, they get your phone numbers. They get all of that. They get your relatives. You can
sometimes even see like family connections and stuff too, right?
That's right. That's right. And so the way it works is they need that rest of that information to build out their virtual profile or faux profile on you, or synthetic identity is what other people call it, so that then they can go try to create a bank account or a credit card account and so on. And probably with your background, you probably know, and certainly me working at Experian, when you go create these new accounts where you can actually create true fraud, financial fraud, you have to go through something called out of wallet questions, which are these are the questions that only you should know. And they're typically like, did you live at this address? And that personal information. So all of that personal information to get past these account opening procedures are on the people search sites.
Yeah.
So between a data breach and a people search site, a fraudster has more than enough information to commit fraud.
Yeah. So if you can say what sites or places online are the worst perpetrators in this regard of making data public? What's the upside for them to do this too?
Yeah, so sadly, they're all bad because they all have the same information. But the ones that are worse, are the big, what I classify as the bigger ones. And by bigger, I mean more traffic. And the way these sites get traffic is through search engine optimization. So it's bad enough that they are buying all this data and stockpiling it and selling it, but then they publish it in a way where they create HTML pages with deep links so Google can crawl and scrape all this information and then have it show up in Google search results. So the biggest ones are the ones that have mastered SEO so that they show up on page 1, page 2, page 3 of your search results. And those are the Spokeos, the My Lives, the Ben Verifieds, Instant Checkmate, White Pages, and so on, Intellius, kind of the big six there.
What are the financial gains? You said that they sell this information. Like how does the money flow in these types of scenarios?
Yeah, I mean, sadly, most of these are scams of some sort where they try to get the consumer to sign up for a monthly paid membership, and then they just keep hitting the credit card every single month. Most of the way these sites work is they're so concerned about chargeback rates because most people don't want these services. They somehow are misled into signing up for them. And then, they have to fight the customer service process to get their account closed and their money returned. And so, if you're worried more about chargeback rate than building a good service, you're probably a scam. And, that's what the majority of these things are.
Okay, so to that end, we're going to talk a little bit about your product here as well, but I just want to know in general what is the process with or without your service? Like, what is the process of getting your personal information removed from sites like this? Is this something that you have to sort of do an appeal or a petition or contact someone by phone or what have you?
I'll say the process has gotten better. Now, most of the process is purely online in some form where the consumer, take one step back. If you go to any one of these people search websites, now at the bottom of the page, there's a do not sell my information link. And the consumer would need to click on that link and then jump through a bunch of hoops to figure out like what profiles that they want. So they have to like key in the different URLs. They have a bunch of different things that they need to do. And funny enough, submit their personal information so that then it can be, in essence, removed or opted out. And so usually it's a combination of the consumer has to find the profiles that they want removed and then fill out a form and then submit the form. And then usually they're sent an email where they either have to acknowledge the email or click on a link in an email to complete the process. So it can be quite cumbersome, I'll say.
Yeah, and there's so many of them that
there's hundreds. I mean, that's the problem. Is like you'd be spending all day, every day doing this.
So I one of the the big ads that I see on podcasts these days is for services that like scroll through all of your subscriptions each month and let you know like what you're paying for that you might not know about. And then they do the auto unsubscribe to the page. Is this a similar thing where your service goes through the sort of like the hoop jumping or has it down to a science where it can fill out the form? Okay.
Yeah. So I'll first off say the people search sites are not our friend. I mean, it's definitely, we don't have like a direct relationship with them where, we give them a list and they're nice guys and they process it for us. They're the enemy. And so we automate the process to fill out all these forms find the profiles, fill out the forms, click on the emails. We create fake emails so that we take on all the requests, and then we process all of that on behalf of our paid members or our consumers, and so that they don't have to do a single thing. And then the challenge with it is it's not instant. Right. The removals can take time, so we are constantly monitoring for the removal to actually be processed, and then be able to ensure when we tell one of our consumers that yes, in fact, you have been removed. We know with confidence that yes, we have been successful at doing that. I mean, we take that very seriously. But it's a fully automated process to go through. We're up to about 160 websites on our way to about 200 over the next few months.
Got it. Now, does this service also include things like doxing and other malicious forms of dissemination of private information, or is this mostly just these services? So I'll say for OneRep, it is only these people search websites. Doxing and some of these things may be outcomes of the data being available on the people search websites. Like I was talking with a client the other day about this, and the reality is there's only so much we can do, right? We can, we're sort of like level 1, level 2 of your defense. If there's a fraudster or a stalker or someone who really intends to cause some form of harm, we're going to make it more difficult, right? It's like putting the ADT sign out in front of your house, right? It's like probably easier to go to the next house, right? Exactly.
So we try to make it harder for fraudsters to commit fraud against our members, and unfortunately, they'll try to go find someone else that's an easier target. Right. But if someone's highly motivated, in our kind of polarized world that we live in these days, it's really tough to stop stuff like that.
Sure. So I discussed a few possible scenarios at the top of the show where having your private information publicly available can take a worrying situation like a breach of a company's password and account into its customers and turn it into something more nefarious. So can you give me some other examples that you've seen of public data on these sites being used to bad ends?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, sadly, it's the use case for this kind of data with fraudsters and criminals and so on has just only grown.
Right.
One of the things that we're seeing, so I'll kind of give you two or three.
Please.
One example is employees at companies that interact with the public in certain ways. So think of it like healthcare workers or lawyers, doctors, and so on. They're doing work, they're interacting with the public, and then the public may not like what they're doing, right? Or they feel that they've been wronged in some way.
Oh, yeah.
The public can easily now go look you up on Google, find your personal information on one of the people search sites, and now show up at your doorstep. And that's what's really scary. So the notion of stalking has really increased. And that's both a private sector and public sector. The second use case that we've been seeing is with our public sector clients. Think of it like social workers, right? We have one district here in California where they have 500 social workers on our platform, and this is life threatening, right? These people are doing work for the city. They're trying to help families, and people react in different ways. They don't like outcomes, and so they try to take matters into their own hand. And that's a real problem, right? We work with a lot of police departments and things like that. Same thing, where it's like, they're involved in some incident, and next thing you know, someone's Googling the officer's name to try to find out, how to harass them or their family. And, people who are doing work every day should not be harassed at home, for their job. And so we're seeing sort of our business booming in the employee benefit space and in this kind of like public sector space. And then interestingly, we've been seeing an uptick in just retail as well, like where customer service agents are being harassed.
Yeah.
So this big notion is centers around harassment, whether it's online harassment or physical harassment at your house, is probably one of the biggest things that we're seeing right now. And then in a whole nother bucket, sorry for being long-winded here.
Please, no, this is great. Yeah.
In a whole nother bucket, the dating industry is going through a lot of this right now. You've probably seen some, shows on Netflix and so on that have, characterized this. But the dating industry is one where, someone who's online dating goes in with this kind of open heart, I'm wearing my heart on my sleeve. I want to truly find my mate. And then, they end up getting stalked or harassed because,
romance
party. Yeah, like one party doesn't, know how to take no for an answer, or like you said, someone's, pretending to be someone they're not, and wants to defraud them of money and so on. So, between employee kind of public-private sector, retail, dating, and obviously the general consumer, we're seeing, sadly so, an uptick in this kind of, I guess, need.
Right. So from a personal security standpoint, can you talk about if there even are any ways that users can reduce the number of places where their info can get leaked in the first place? Because obviously your service patches the holes in the bucket, but is there a way of like users being able to stop pouring so much water into that leaky bucket in the first place? Is there like, don't, opt in your address when you're ordering things, or does stuff like that have any play? It does. Yeah,
it all does. So you're absolutely on the right track.
Okay.
As a consumer is navigating, the internet, and they want to watch like free movie trailers, or or enter a contest for a sweepstakes. You've really got to stop doing that, or you have to create fake, you almost have to game the game, right? Which is you almost have to create your own fake identity with a fake date of birth and fake address and fake emails and fake phone numbers, and, even get like a burner phone number, and if you're going to do that and be able to reduce the volume of public information that you're sharing, or your personal information that you're sharing, Because one of your earlier questions was like, where does this all come from? Ultimately, all of this data rolls up into companies like LexisNexis and TransUnion, where they're buying all of this data that has been submitted to, sort of the data collector companies. So these, the sweepstakes company, is collecting all the data. They can't do anything with it. So they sell it to people like TransUnion or LexisNexis, and then LexisNexis, TransUnion, they pull in more data from more of these kind of data collectors, clean it all up, and then they sell it to the people search companies.
Yeah.
And so they're the ones that are like, actually like, how, I don't know how it's possible, like a company like TransUnion can sell my personal information to these people search companies without my approval. That's the real problem here.
Right. I've also heard, I don't know if this is even, recommended or not, but like people say, just as a matter of course, like, as you're signing up for things, like change, the spelling of your last name by a letter or two, or add an apartment, just fog your general information enough that
I'll say this, you have to do more than just a little bit, right? Like more than just changing a letter or two. You really almost have to come up with a whole new name.
Okay, got it.
And a whole new address, because even if you're off by a letter or two, these people search sites don't care about true identities. So like I used to work for Experian, and like, say what you want about Experian, we at least tried really hard to make sure like, this is your credit report and only you can access it. And, we tried to have all the rigors of true identity verification. The people search guys don't care about that. So they commingle data, like, your name can be spelled off even a little bit and it'll still show up as part of a search because they have some fuzzy logic around it. So if you really want to, do this, you truly have to create like your own synthetic identity that you use on the internet, because all this data will be sold behind the scenes.
Okay. Well, that brings me to my next question about sort of like a larger solution. What are some changes either from a legal or regulatory standpoint, or even a tech standpoint, that you'd like to see that would do a better job at keeping private info actually private?
To me, it's two things very quickly, which are like, how do these large entities that are publicly traded allowed to sell my personal information without my approval in bulk to other companies? That's like, the government needs to regulate that and, make it mandated that you can't just sell bulk personal information to companies. Like that to me is number one. Number two is Google should not be allowed to publish this openly on the internet. Like they should not be able to publish a phone number or an address on the internet openly. Like stop those two things, and like the majority of this problem goes away.
Yeah, no, it's astonishing. You can look up, you just see how a relative's doing or whatever, and you Google them, and like one of the first things you get is their whitepages.com, listing or whatever. And you're like, it's like grandpa,
these people search sites, they're really just marketing engines, right? I mean, they're just buying data from whoever. They don't have a lot of rigor.
They're not necessarily like Snidely Whiplash, like, twisting their mustache and cackling. They're just, this is a really good source of income, I suppose, for them. So it's
very profitable, right? Because their traffic is free because it's SEO, and then they can charge, whatever, $20 a month, and it's, there's low overhead, and they're not putting a lot of investment in tech to like, really ID proof, people and so on.
Right. Now, if I were to give you the magic gavel and you could just sort of regulate your sort of dream legislation around this into law, what would it look like in terms of like, because we have such a patchwork system of law and regulation around the internet anyway, largely. I mean, we could go all day on that about, the actual tech literacy of people in our legislature. But what would it look like in terms of like really sticking? Because, there's so many regulations like GDPR and stuff where it's like, well-intended, there's ways around it, what have you. So what would your sort of like ironclad version of this look like?
I think one of the number one things that has to happen with the regulation is that I, as a consumer and a citizen of this country, I have to have the right to own my data. like in America, you don't actually own your data. The company that collects it owns it.
Yep.
And it's sort of like shame on you if you gave it to that company. So I think it has to start with the just change of philosophy, which is like, I need to be able to assert my right that this is my data and you can't do anything with it without my permission. To me, that solves it right there. Right? Is if I own the rights to my own data. But unfortunately, you give your data to Amazon, Amazon owns it. You give your data to Netflix, Netflix owns it.
Right.
You give it to some online sweepstakes thing, they own it and they're selling it, and they put in the terms and conditions that by giving them your data, they can sell it.
On page 47 of the terms and conditions, they let you know.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's just, I think it's got to start with that kind of fundamental foundation that, like, in America, Americans own their data and you can't do anything with it unless you have their permission.
Can you talk at all about the way that some of because again, this is very patchwork, but the GDPR, CCPA, and some of the other sort of regulatory data privacy frameworks are coming up, and the right to be forgotten and the right to, you're not owning your data necessarily, but there are places where sort of misuse of your data, I suppose, can be turned into fines and so forth. Do you think that there is like an umbrella version of this that could happen someday that sort of like turns the tide, or does it really have to be kind of an untouchable style, crackdown?
I'll say this. I think I'm very bullish on the future with like Web 3.0 and metaverse and sort of the notion of smart contracts where you actually have the technical infrastructure to enforce the rights. So I think the thing that happens now is there's no way to claw, like even if the government said, yes, Mark, you own your own data, there's no way for me to actually execute on that in any way, right? It's like, as soon as I give it to a company and they bury the terms and conditions, it's sort of like, great, you gave me the data anyway. Yeah. So I think it has to, I think we have to have that evolution of technology combined with policy that would, I think, capture this. So, I guess I'm bullish on this kind of notion of I in the future can truly own my identity, and then I have the ease of technology to assert my identity or share my identity. Because right now the tech stack doesn't really exist. I mean, you have Apple making inroads to hide email addresses and phone numbers, and that's great. But it's just not comprehensive enough. There's so many ways around it. So, and
it seems like a lot of the terms and conditions, I agree to the above, that it's a yes or no thing. Like, you're either agreeing to this thing or you're not using the service. There's not, I mean, certainly
very black or white.
Yeah. In like your OS or whatever, like Microsoft will say, can we take some of your data to use for testing purposes? And you can say, no, you may not. And you click the button, but there's not really that binary on a lot of these. Like, you're either opting in or you just don't have Apple TV,
That's right.
Yeah, you don't get to watch Ted Lasso. Yeah,
exactly. No, you're right. And like, I think people have tried different concoctions to try to work around this, but I don't know. Nothing's really worked to date.
Yeah.
The government as a whole, the federal government hasn't been really supportive. Like, we don't have a chief privacy officer in America. So we don't have someone innately looking out for this problem or issue and trying to find solutions. And so I think, what you're going to have is, in the future, hopefully with, powered by the blockchain with smart contracts, a virtual identity that I can have and, enforce my rights around that. But it's going to take a long time, right, for all the systems to get caught up and, and so on. And, it comes down to even like, going to a grocery store, and being able to, how do I assert my right at the grocery store with my driver's license that they're just now staring at,
Yeah, right. So, the focus of the show, cyber work, is work in the cybersecurity industry and how to get into it. And you've had jobs at a lot of different phases of data privacy, security, IT, tech, marketing, the film industry. So can you talk about some of the jobs that are available, people who want to help people get their lives back, repair damage, shut down this type of misuse of private data? Where would you, for our listeners, where would you suggest they sort of get started if they want to sort of join the fight?
Yeah, I mean, I think the number one thing you got to do is you got to learn about what's happening and how all this stuff works. I was very fortunate that I worked for Experian, and it was still one of my favorite places to work. Never thought I would work at a credit bureau, but it turned out to be just an amazing opportunity. And so I would encourage people to find that entry level job where they're kind of thrust into the world of Infosec, consumer data protection, and so on. And you can do it from either the true, just pure InfoSec security perspective, if you're into that side of things. I kind of, my route was more of, I came through the marketing channel. Right. And so the marketing channel with Experian was about, okay, what data can we use to market to people? How do we protect people's privacy when they come to our site to sign up for our services? And then how do we go basically scour, the internet, dark web, and other places to find where people's information has been leaked? And so I got to see it from a different eye. And I think that really helped me understand the problem larger than just simply looking at it from here's how some malware got on a system and is harvesting data. So I think you might want to actually encourage people to look into marketing roles that have, the requirement to work with data. There's a lot of ad networks and companies like that take privacy very seriously, or are now dealing with GDPR and CCPA and other things. Those are great places where you learn about the impact of consumer data, consumer privacy, and what you have to do to secure all of that information. So I think it's the more you can understand the real world nature of the problem, I think that's what's going to help you the most.
Okay, now that's awesome advice, and that's a big part of what we talk about here. Is we're really at this point trying to encourage people, because tech people are going to tech, and the security people are going to security. They're already excited about it. They've been hacking since they were 4 years old. They've been doing this. They've been doing that. But a lot of people are very intimidated because they think if I haven't hacked in my local credit union when I was 6 years old, how can I ever catch up? I'm 50 years old. I'm an auto mechanic. I'm this and that. Can you talk about what some of the baseline of tech knowledge that you had and need? I mean, you're sort of an outlier example, but what do you think someone coming into it now really needs to know, apart from sort of marketing skills, writing skills, soft skills?
You got to know data. And what I mean by that is you have to understand the concepts of data. And kind of like what the example I used earlier, right, is this is the way a fraudster works, right, is they'll get the data breach data. So now it's they got a list of names and some kind of, social security number or bank account. Not much you can do with that on a standalone basis. So then they have to start understanding how you append data to that to build out the rest of the story. And I think that's what you do certainly in marketing when you're targeting people, is you start with a small set of data and then you start to append data around it. So if you understand that concept of okay, I have a small set of data, how do I enrich it or append elements to it? I think that'll help you a lot. I certainly know from my background when back to film school days, because I was developing databases, you learn that structure of okay, I got a couple columns of data here and I got to somehow link it to this column here. I need a common key between them so that I can join and create that append. And so I think understanding sort of the basics of how data gets joined together, I think actually is really, really powerful.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, we just had a live webinar on data privacy and the sort of constellation of privacy certifications for different countries and so forth. So that sounds like that's kind of connected, but it's still a little sort of step sideways. You're sort of looking at the data in the petri dish and how it sort of replicates and moves, rather than necessarily being the person who understands the sort of chart of yes, no, this is this is acceptable in Canada, this isn't, and so forth.
Well, I mean, to that point, it's sort of like there's like 3 or 4 disciplines, right? There's the true hardcore security, encryption, right? All that side of it, right? There's what you were just referring to, which is kind of like the legal policy, privacy side. There's the marketing side, which is like, how do I use this? And then there's the like software developer side of it, to understand how it even could magically come together. And, in some ways, you got to know a little bit about all of those things to really be successful as you progress.
If you were hiring someone for a team who's working on this sort of stuff, like what are things that make their resume kind of float to the top of the pile? Like what do you need to see on it?
Yeah, probably. I don't know if people like my answer, but probably sadly not much. The number one thing I look for when I hire people like into this kind of data space is you have to be naturally curious. Mm-hmm. If you're not naturally curious, then like you're just doing a job. Data, there isn't like the magic answer right up front. You have to have this natural curiosity to go find and explore things and figure out where things might have come from and how things got connected together. And so that's something you have to talk through with people more than finding on a resume, because as you know, people can list tons of credentials, they can have tons of certifications, and all that's great. But like if you're not naturally curious, like, you're just sort of waiting for someone else to direct you as to what to do. I love to hire people who are naturally curious and, love also testing. I was working with a client and, I was like, hey, are you A/B testing these things? And like at Experian, we tested everything. And that's probably why I love that job so much, was because it taught me that rigor of like, you have to be able to test things and optimize and not just take what you see for granted. And I think those are really 2 elements. So I guess if I had to see something on a resume, it would be that they had knowledge about like A/B testing and, had a lot of skill sets around testing.
Yeah, you would need to see more of a narrative than a list of abbreviations.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, well, I think that's a good place to wrap up. So as we wrap up today, John, could you, we talked about it a bit, but could you tell us a bit more about OnePro and some of the ways your customers are using it? And also if OnePro has any big projects or innovations or changes on the horizon that you want to talk about?
Sure. Yeah. So it's OneRep.
OneRep. OneRep. I'm sorry.
No worries.
Typo. Okay. Yeah.
No,
I had it right once. Okay.
So it's OneRep. And I mean, I think the interesting thing there is, again, all the different now use cases, like a lot of people think of this functionality as like, oh, it's just a pure consumer thing. It's just for consumers. And it's really not. Like, this whole employee base, with like I said, people coming in from different job classifications, whether it's public sector or private sector, where they have interactions with the public and, the public responds in negative ways. So we really want to make sure that people know that this is bigger than just, someone simply, concerned about their privacy. It's much bigger impact. Employers need to take this much more seriously and look at offering this kind of functionality as a employee benefit. We have a lot of companies coming to us going, hey, we want to show that we're doing something for our employees, and this is a great way to do so. I'll also say the dating space is something that's there's so much fraud in that space that, we really need to encourage people that before they start online dating, get your information scrubbed before you just jump in and start trying to meet people and, potentially have issues there. From the OneRep standpoint, as a platform and so on, over the next couple months, you see us get to about 200 or more websites that we scrub from. And then, we just are constantly adding into we're a SaaS software at the end of the day. So into the platform to just keep adding value for consumers and now for businesses.
All right. Well, one last question for all the beans here. If people want to know more about Mark Kapczynski or OneRep, where should they go online?
Well, most people find me on LinkedIn, so not too many Mark Kapczynskis out there. So just find me on LinkedIn. Happy to connect with folks. For OneRep, just come to onerep.com, ONEREP.com.
Beautiful. Mark, thank you for your time and insights today. This was so much fun.
Awesome. Love the conversation. Thanks for having me on.
My pleasure. And as always, I'd like to thank everyone here who is listening to and supporting the show. New episodes of the Cyberwork podcast are available every Monday at 1 p.m. Central, both on video at our YouTube page and on audio wherever you get your podcasts. I want to make sure that you all know that we have a lot more than weekly interviews and cybersecurity careers to offer you. You can also learn cybersecurity for free on our Infosec skills platform. So just go to infosecinstitute.com/free and create an account, and you can start learning right now. We've got 10 free cybersecurity foundation courses, 6 cybersecurity leadership courses, 11 courses on digital forensics, 11 courses on incident response, 7 on security architecture, DevSecOps, Python, JavaScript, ICS, SCADA, security fundamentals, and more. Just go to infosecinstitute.com/free and start learning today. Thanks once again to Mark Kapczynski and OneRep, and thank you all so much for watching and listening. We'll speak to you next week.